Awesome. So thank you so much for joining me. If you just want to start by introducing yourself and telling us about what you do.
Absolutely. So I am Teri Moten. I am here in Victoria. And what I do is always a funny question because people many times have no idea what I do because I do so many different things. So first of all, I call myself a super connector because people know regardless of what they need, they can contact me and I can work on getting them connected by day. So my day job is I am a community educator for a local hospice company. And what I do is I go out in the community with community events, and I'm typically the first person that either a person or the family speaks to when wanting to learn more about hospice services and how to get them kind of through that process of using services. By night and by weekend, I also have a business consulting practice where I work with small businesses, helping them primarily be able to identify ways of increasing new recurring revenue without adding any additional marketing cost. So I'm one of those jack of all trades.
Definitely. Wow. So you really got your work cut out for you. And also you're in two industries that I think have been really hit hard by the pandemic. So let's just dig right into that. Let's
Sure.
talk about what you do in hospice care first. Because I think the world of medicine and patient care has been really turned on its head in this pandemic. So in what ways did the pandemic affect how you do that job?
So it's been a number of ways. So number one, first, I actually ended up going through, was laid off of a previous position in healthcare in the middle of the pandemic. So I was laid off from one position in June, and I then started with the hospice company at the end of July. And I've been in medical sales for a number of years, for at least 10 years. So I've got a history of kind of seeing what it used to be pre-pandemic and how it is now. Some of the big changes, and especially when it comes to kind of the hospice and senior care arena, first and foremost, it is people who don't have a loved one in a nursing facility, whether it's a nursing home or an assisted living facility. I don't think they can ever realize the impact that the pandemic has had, because from March up until recently, literally maybe in the last week, and here we are right now in the middle of October. During that period of time, family could not get in to a nursing facility to see their loved one. And again, unless you've got a family member and you hadn't been able to see them for 6-7 months, you really don't know how that feels. And one of the things that has happened, and I'll give you a great example in the hospice arena, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is hospice services are provided to wherever the patient is, wherever that person is that's receiving services. So whether it's at home, whether they're in a nursing home or a nursing facility, in a hospital. And many times hospice nurses, when they go into, here over the past 6 months, when they've gone into a facility, they've been the ones to have to communicate to family members how that loved one is. Because what family members remember seeing is how that person was, how grandma was in February, because that's the last time they've seen them. And they may not have seen some of the decline that's happened. So that's been a big thing. The other thing that's changed in healthcare is that and they are absolutely healthcare heroes, are worn out because they have been, I see facilities and healthcare workers where they're having to, work double shifts, where they're having to work 24 hours straight. And so it's, I see the toll that it takes on them physically and emotionally. And so I hope people can appreciate what our healthcare heroes have gone through.
We do forget, and like you said, unless you have a family member who is living that reality, then how would you know?
Exactly. And we've literally had where, family had to be, kind of called in because their loved one was in the process of transitioning, quickly. It was truly, kind of those end hours. And the way they got to say goodbye was through the window, looking through the window in their room, or through, FaceTime.
Right.
And so it's really hard to be able to have closure when
Right.
you don't get to have that time with the loved one that you thought you were always going to have.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is just unbelievably difficult.
Hmm.
I really can't imagine. One thing I wanted to also ask is, in any time that you had to be in the office, or just any of your colleagues, did you always have the PPE that you needed, or have access to the PPE that you needed?
We did. And again, I started in hospice, I started at the end of July. So we always had the PPE that was needed. But I do know, again, being in sales, one of my roles is going to different clinics, doctor's offices, of course, hospitals, various medical facilities. And, for a period of time, especially early on, from March to maybe about June, you really did see, especially at a clinic or an individual office level, many of them were struggling to get the PPE that was needed. Because first and foremost, it was going to hospitals, it was going to facilities, and it was a struggle for some of those individual medical offices to be able to get PPE.
Wow. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, so you said that there were some moments where nurses had to kind of be that middleman between the family member that was transitioning and the family. Were any of those cases involving individuals who had complications with COVID-19?
So, and I'm trying to think from memory. I I do know our particular hospice company does take care of patients who have COVID. I can't remember offhand, right off the top of my head, if any of those who passed away was specifically because of those complications. But I'll tell you, there's we have nurses who go into facilities where it definitely, and especially here several months ago, where there definitely was COVID throughout the facility with patients and staff.
Wow. I imagine that's, really scary, going out to work every day. And that's another thing that, I just hope people remember, is that frontline workers, essential workers, really are putting their lives on the line. Still, this pandemic isn't over. It's not any less of a threat now than it was in March and February, so, putting their lives on the line every day to be able to provide care, and keep not only the patient safe, but also themselves, and then subsequently their family as well.
And
Um,
absolutely, and I can speak directly to that because when I was laid off from the previous medical sales position, I really thought long and hard. And for a while, I didn't want to go back into the medical field because again, I was laid off in June, and so it was right in the middle of the pandemic. And my husband has an underlying health issue. My mother, who lives 20 minutes away, and I usually saw a couple of times a month, she is immunocompromised.
mm,
She has rheumatoid arthritis, and so since COVID, I hadn't been into my mom's house because I won't go into her house. I haven't been into my parents' home since Christmas or January.
oh,
Now
wow.
I talk to her outside. We'll go outside and
Right.
stand in the driveway and talk. But it was initially very difficult for me to go back into the medical arena because I knew I had to be careful
Right.
because of the family members I have.
Right. Yeah. And see, that's a prime example of, just trying to weigh the cons and the pros and cons of, like, okay, well, if I do this, is that going to put someone at risk? If I go out, if I see this person, and that's something that in another conversation I had, I was saying that it's one thing to not see someone for a while because you're busy or life, gets in the way. But it's another thing to have in the back of your mind that if I see this person, it could hurt them and
Right.
God forbid take their life, and that's the thing about this virus. We can't see it, but the effects of it, we not only see, but we feel.
Literally a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, my daughter and I, our daughter is 15 years old, and we always go out to my parents for the holidays. And we were sitting here thinking, this will be the first time, I mean, since she's been born, we won't be out, we wouldn't be out there. And then all of a sudden, I was at PetSmart. Me and my daughter were at PetSmart. They were the cheerleaders. She's a cheerleader, and they were doing some volunteer work this past Monday. And lo and behold, my mom bebops into PetSmart. And I was like, well, since you're out at PetSmart, I guess we're going to be coming to the house for Thanksgiving, huh?
Right. But yeah, so switching gears to the business consulting that you do, yet another industry that has been heavily impacted by the pandemic. So can you talk to me, share a little bit more about what those impacts were?
Sure. Just here in the Crossroads, there are so many business owners, and pandemic aside, many times people go into business because they have a skill that they are excellent at. They've got some knowledge they want to share. They see there's a way that they can, earn an income with something they have, knowledge, skill, or what have you. Many times they don't have the business side of it. They know what they do and they know how to do that well, but don't necessarily know how to operate the business. So inject a lot of businesses that are like that, and then put a pandemic on top of it. And I saw so many businesses here in the Crossroads that were just decimated. So, a fair amount of them that ended up having to close their doors permanently. Many of them now still struggling in trying to recoup revenue, the term business consultants and business coaches you have been using for the last 6 months, figuring out how they need to pivot their business. So if it had been a face-to-face business, do they transition virtually? If they had limits on how many occupants or how many patrons could come into a brick and mortar business, how do they work around that? And so my heart goes out to business owners because, again, many of them are still struggling, trying to figure out, can they still remain open? And I've had so many conversations with many of them that have had to close their business part-time and just have it open part-time and go out to get a full-time job to still help take care of the family. But they don't want to give up their dream of the business that they were building.
Right. Yeah, that's incredibly difficult. And I think I saw a stat that said 1 in 5 businesses in America have shut their doors.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a staggering number when you think about it. And especially in a bit of a smaller city like Victoria, I noticed that some of the businesses that I've seen there are more family owned. Maybe they don't have a website. It's just kind of word of mouth. They kind of get business through their personal network. And so that's already not the most stable structure or form of marketing. Mm-hmm. And then when people can't even come and see you physically, I mean, it's just adding insult to injury.
Because now you're not just competing with the local person down the street, you're competing globally, with businesses who can do the same thing typically you can do, but they are branded better and people can find them. And, but like you're saying, then add on a pandemic on top of that. If you already don't have a presence and your name really isn't out as much, then it's really tough.
Any of the businesses that you consulted, how are they doing? Did any of them have to close or kind of scale down or downsize, or are they doing okay?
So many of them ended up, again, kind of whether temporarily or kind of permanently scaling down and pivoting on how they offer services. So some of the brick and mortars that really didn't have that online, that e-commerce presence, were quickly, trying to put that in place. There were also people who did that I was always recommending to them, that had products that they were selling. One of the things I would also work with them on is, let's also package the knowledge that you have, because just because a patron can't come into you physically, let's look at the knowledge base you have. How can we build a course around that? How can we build something that can be a digital product and put online? So even if people can't physically come in, let's get your knowledge out there and build a revenue base. One of the things as well is, I had a number of clients that I tried to, where there were synergies, partner them together to be able to send referrals from their customer bases, their respective bases, to one another. So there's been a lot of pivoting in trying to see how they could continue to have the revenue to remain open. And then you have some businesses that, my dad owns a restaurant, 20 minutes from here, owns a restaurant in Fannin. He's always done well. He's done better than ever in the pandemic. Which just completely, it just floored me. I didn't, and I was trying to figure out, well, how is it? But people would go out to him, and he's 20 minutes away. People would go out and they would kind of buy bulk food. He does barbecue. They would buy bulk food kind of for the week or what have you. And he's done fabulous.
See, and I love that you talked about pivoting, because I think that was already, a North Star in the world of business and entrepreneurship. But now this was one of those moments where it's like, okay, so you understand what it means, but can you do it?
Right.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I think that was kind of the sink or swim, do or die moment for businesses. Is like, okay, we can't control this. Nobody asked for this. Nobody wants this. But this is the situation that we're in. This is our reality. So how do we move from one place to another? And if anybody's listening to this, it sounds like you need to send her an email, because I heard some fantastic ideas. And I think one of the biggest things is helping people visualize what is possible.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things I could say is, for businesses, is don't be an island. Don't think, oh, I've got to go through this alone. Seek advice from other people in the business world who may be able to give you some ideas, some strategies, and don't be afraid with collaborating, even if it's the quote unquote competition. That's one of the things that I try to get businesses to open up their minds to is, you can't be all things to all people. And you may have, again, the competition down the street, but if you all are still, they may not want to serve clients that are, above or below this particular income bracket. Let's say if it's a service based, it might be an accountant. They may not want to serve clients that are below a certain amount, but you may have just started your, accounting business, and you would gladly take on some of those clients to build up a portfolio. Well, collaborate on that. There's more than enough pie out there where people can collaborate. Those who have synergies that aren't competing businesses, and those who are competing businesses.
See, guys need to email her. That is a word right there. That is so powerful. And I think that's a brilliant blueprint for how businesses can start to pick up the pieces and get back on their feet again. Because the reality is, and something I finally accepted earlier in the year, is that it's not going away anytime soon. It's not going to just suddenly vanish on January 1st, 2021, And so we need to start thinking about, okay, well, how do I operate in a pandemic?
Correct.
No one's saying we have to stop the world and cease all normal operation. Well, cease all operation. It just might have to look a bit differently. So brilliant, excellent points. Awesome. My final question is just, looking forward as we continue to grapple with this pandemic and both in healthcare and business and any industry, what is your hope or advice for the community?
So my big hope, and this kind of combines pandemic and kind of the two P's almost, so pandemic and politics in a sense, but my hope is that the community can truly come together. I mean, I saw how we came together after Harvey. I mean, and so the Crossroads, especially Victoria, has a great community that swoops in and comes together when something's going on. My hope is that we kind of stop looking past each other, number one, stop trying to hear each other, and really be able to be empathetic to what somebody else is going through. My hope is that people understand your experience may not be somebody else's experience, that people deal with this differently because of the circumstances that they have in their lives. So I'm hoping that, and for the most part, Victoria seems to be pretty empathetic to one another. I just hope that kind of continues, because like you said, it's not over. We're still in the midst of it. We will be kind of dealing with this for some time to come, way some time to come.
Right.
And so I just hope the community continues to, again, be able to civilly work together to be able to continue to be a great community.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I really